Okay, welcome. Thanks for spending time this afternoon to listen about ways to jumpstart your school garden. We have a lot of resources that we'll be sharing with you after we're done here today, and great slate of presenters with Miku Paul, Neil Lash, Ryan Parker, and myself, Richard Hodges. And I shared a bio of each of us in an email that should have gotten through Eventbrite, but we can also send that information as follow-up. And also wanted to thank Maine School Garden Network for putting this together, and the support of Maine Agriculture in the Classroom for helping create the funding that made this happen. For the sake of time management, we're going to receive your questions that you might have throughout the presentation, and we will respond to them in an email afterward, just because we don't have time for question and answer too much today. So with that, I'd like to get started here with a land acknowledgement. Just wanting to note and think about that Indigenous nations have been on this land for 11,000 years. Europeans, of which I'm a descendant, settled here roughly 400 years ago. I feel grief knowing these European settlements resulted in the disruption of the way of life for the Native people in this region. Where I am now, it's actually Sandwich, New Hampshire. The Winnipesaukee people lived, part of the Abenaki, people of Dawnland. Diseases from European settlers such as smallpox and influenza and outright warfare caused the fractioning of the Winnipesaukee, but the people and their legacy live on. I'd like to take a moment of silence to reflect on the heritage of the people who lived here and continue to live on this land and have been here for thousands of years, closely connected with land and water. I intend through my actions to bring healing in what ways I can to the land and to the people who have been displaced. Not to impose what I think, but to listen and be responsive to what can bring healing. I'm grateful to have you all tuning in today while we discuss ways to get children closer to the land through gardening. In this way, we can plant seeds of stewardship and promote a better relationship with the planet. And in this way, pay homage to those who were and continue to be part of this land. I do feel very grateful to be here amongst the mountains. And I believe that soil and the minerals of the soil that have been around for thousands of years are a connection to the past in so many ways. And as garden educators, I really commend you for connecting students with this integral piece to human development and to the healing that is needed in this world. So I feel very connected to this land where I am, and I feel that connecting youth through gardening is such an important thing, and so glad that so many people feel the same way, or I feel like you must if you're here today. So I'd like to pass the torch to Miku Paul, and so she can continue this webinar. And Miko is a permaculturalist and Native person, and works for Gadakana, a great organization. So Miko, I'll pass it to you. And there you go.
Hello, everyone. Woligizi Basque, Dolwis Miku Paul, Woligi Scott, Kizuswil, Dangakalugil, Skijin Neil, Nudabex Walastaquake. Good afternoon. My name is Miku Paul. It's a beautiful day here right now. It's sunny out. I want to ask how everyone's doing and let you know that I am an Indigenous woman from Kings Clear First Nations. I'm Maliseet. My family settled actually in Old Town where I grew up. And about the land acknowledgements, I just want to share with you some food for thought, really. We're here to learn together about the land that sustains us and how we might teach more children the respect and reverence for the good earth and the food she provides. In the garden, children learn many important things about the life cycle, cooperation, nurturing crops and sharing tools, sharing foods. Part of that learning should also be an acknowledgement of the first peoples who lived in your region. Acknowledging the land that you live on and grow food on is also a really good first step in fostering respect for what the land gives us. Land acknowledgements should always be specific and include regional history of the tribes that resided and continue to reside there, as well as a recognition that we are in relationship with the land. It is not something that we use. If possible, consider having your students do some basic research on the topography of their region. Ask questions. How was this place formed millennia ago? Who lived here? What are the major landforms that support us, like forests and rivers, ponds, lakes and streams, mountains? In this way, you can begin to build a foundation for being with the land as a steward and relation, rather than being on it to exploit it. For example, in my research here in Maine, as part of my land acknowledgement training most recently, I discovered fascinating history about the glaciers that formed Maine. It's very beautiful here, as many of you know. And now I know that there are some gigantic glacial boulders that I want to go and visit. Literally, I guess some of them are 100 feet long. So consider time is a story, and our human presence here is relatively recent. But my hope is that if we strengthen our relationship to the land, future generations will care for it and all of its inhabitants with respect and mindfulness. And now I would like to share the Penobscot Corn Mother legend with you. So this should be a nice, fun and relaxing segment here. When Gluskabe, the All Maker, lived on earth, there were no people yet. But one day when the sun was high, a youth appeared and called Gluskabe uncle, brother of my mother. This young man was born from the foam of the waves, foam quickened by the wind and warmed by the sun. It was the motion of the wind, the moistness of the water, and the sun's warmth, which gave him life. Warmth above all, because warmth is life. The young man lived with Gluskabe and became his chief helper. Now, after these two powerful beings had created all manner of things, there came to them, as the sun was shining at high noon, a beautiful young woman. She was born of the wonderful earth itself, of the green plants and the dew and the sun's warmth, because a drop of dew fell on a leaf and was warmed by the sun. Because light and warmth are life itself, this woman came into being. I am love, said the maiden. I am a strength giver and the nourisher. I am the provider for the people and all the wondrous animals that make their home here. They in turn love me. Then Gluskabe thanked the great mystery for having sent the Corn Maiden. It came to pass that the youth, the great nephew, married Corn Maiden, and she conceived, and thus became the first Corn Mother, and Gluskabe, the great uncle, taught their children how to live, as he has always taught the human beings all they need to know. Now, the people increased and became numerous. They lived by hunting and gathering, and the more people there were, the less game they found. The land was hunted out. And as the animals decreased, starvation came upon the people. First Mother pitied them. Little children came to First Mother and said, "We are hungry, feed us." But she had nothing to give them, and she wept. She told them, "Be patient. I will make some food. Then your little bellies will be full." But she kept weeping. Her husband asked, "How can I make you smile? How can I make you happy?" "There is only one thing that can stop my tears." "What is it?" asked the husband. "It is this. You must kill me," she said. "Oh, I could never do that," he said. And she said, "You must, or I will go on weeping and grieving forever." Then the husband traveled far, far to the north, where the clouds end. He went to ask the great teacher, his uncle Gluskabe, what he should do. "Well, you must do what she wants. You must kill her," said Gluskabe. So the young man went back to his home, and now it was his turn to weep. First Mother told him, "Tomorrow at high noon, you must do it. After you have killed me, let two of our sons take hold of my hair and drag my body over the empty patch of earth, back and forth, over every part of the ground until all the flesh has been torn from my body. Then you must take my bones, gather them, and bury them in the center of this clearing. Then you shall leave." She smiled on the great nephew and then said, "Wait 7 moons and then come back. You will find my flesh there, flesh given out of love, and it will nourish and strengthen you forever and ever." And so it was done. With great weeping and reluctance, they finally took her bones and buried them in the center and went away. When Gluskabe's children came back to the place after 7 moons had passed, they found the earth covered with tall, green tasseled plants. The plant's fruit, corn, was given so that the people might live and flourish. The people partook of the first mother's flesh and found it sweet beyond words. They followed her instruction and did not eat all, but set many kernels back into the earth from whence they came. And in this way, Corn Mother's flesh renews and replenishes itself, generation after generation. And at the center of the clearing, where they had buried First Mother's bones, they found another plant growing, broad-leafed and fragrant, tobacco. But that is another story. Nedimsiu, that is all. So this legend is really a variation on Corn Mother and Corn Maiden that you see across many indigenous cultures in North America. That's a Penobscot version. And I think it's a really useful way to bring some context through storytelling of the ancient origins of corn. Many children don't even know, necessarily where corn comes from. They think food comes from the supermarket or something. Now, I want to talk a little tiny bit about Three Sisters Gardens. I don't want to preserve the time because I know folks have a lot of great content coming up. But we know that Three Sisters Gardens, this indigenous practice, has gone on for a very, very long time. And I'm sure Neil's going to have some great things to say about corn origins and teosinte and those evolutions. And I think with the students, it's important to underscore why this approach to gardening is useful, why it has been historically useful, how the plants are mutually beneficial. Corn providing a structure for pole beans to climb, beans providing fixed nitrogen in the earth, and squash giving a living mulch that is also quite prickly, and it helps to keep small mammals from raiding the crops. We know that many times if a river plain wasn't used, a clearing in a forest was burned, and those clearings became the Three Sisters Gardens seasonally. And after they were grown for several years, they would move to a new space. And obviously, observing the crops, they could tell that the crops needed more nutrition. And so that newly open space in forested areas then provided renewal for understory plants and for the cycle to begin again. It's important, I think, to use the mounds. We know corn needs to be grown in a block so that it will pollinate itself. But the mounds were very, very useful because when we raise, especially in our region, when we raise the earth up, it warms earlier and it stays warm. And these are warm weather crops. So putting the mounds on a grid obviously is a good idea. One of the most frequent mistakes I see with folks is that they put all the seeds in at once. And it's very important to let the corn come in and rise to 12, 14 inches before you place your bean and squash seed. I usually reserve some squash seedlings in case our germination is low if we do direct seed for the mounds for the squashes. And here in Maine, with my Gadakana women, we typically use cultivars like a Beneke callus flint or a Beneke rose flint corn, skunk beans, the Beneke Vermont true red cranberry. There are beans out there called cranberry beans, but the true indigenous strain is actually very beautiful. It's round, it's fully round and very dark red and glossy. It's not flattened. And I think that actually Richard's got some sources for you. Right now in Maine, we're engaged in working to grow on some of these crops so that we can share seed and have some of our own to be sure it's always available. And there, another great bean is the Arikara yellow bean. And this year I'm going to be trying the Narragansett succotash bean, which is very beautiful. It's a deep blue and quite fat and round. And it looks almost like a really oversized corn kernel. Very interesting bean. And then for squash, we actually grow what's called a pumpkin, or cucurbita pipo, the Abenaki long pie. These crops continue to be grown because their vitality and their storage power and their resiliency is superb. And that becomes more and more important now that we know we're in climate change. And we want to make sure that these old seed strains can continue. I'm not against hybrids at all. In fact, I like cucumbers because the production is much better. But I think there is a real importance to learn from these crops and to continue to get the seed produced. If we think about the history of the corn and these crops, they store very well. The long pie has, again, superb storage capacity. I have opened in spring a long pie and found a sprouted seed inside that long pie, and it was still good to eat. So a lot of these foods were put in the ground in catches by Wabanaki people. And historically, there were times when the settlers would raid the catches and take the corn. And that was a real problem because if you travel from camp to camp, seasonally to the coast for fishing, and then you return later and find that the foods you depended on are not there, people are going to they're going to starve and be hungry. And so also you see the historical piece of how these foods became an issue of conflict during colonization. A little interesting note is about pellagra and how the settlers knew we were eating corn, but they did not know to nixtamalize it to release the niacin. And so they got on a corn diet because they had few foods available and they became ill from that. So there are so many wonderful things that you can learn from Indigenous culture and history by working together with someone who's knowledgeable. And I think that's everything that I have for today. Thank you very much for having me. And I consider it a pleasure and honor to talk with you today.
Well, thank you very much, Miku. That was lovely. Again, we'll provide more information about Gudakana and the work that Miku does, and we'll share that additional resources. So thank you very much, and look forward to continuing the conversation. So now we're going to, Neil is getting something together back there. Thank you very much, Miku.
We're all set. You hear me, Richard?
Oh yeah, you're good to go.
Here we go. All set to go now?
Yep, yeah, Neil Ash from Madomic Valley High School.
Yeah, I'm unbelievably impressed that on a Friday afternoon, 45 teachers could take a 70-degree afternoon and give it up to do this. This is most impressive. And I can say that I appreciate each one of you being a teacher. I know what Friday afternoons feel like. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you about saving seeds. Quite impressively, Miku, I think every seed that you mentioned, I have frozen in that freezer behind me. And so one of the impressive things about seed saving is that not only is it a way to save seeds for food, it's also a way to save the stories of culture, as Miku alluded, and it's a way of saving tremendous history. I didn't realize that Miku was going to do this if you would watch this, check this out. This is unrehearsed. I am a member of Native Seeds Search, which is located in Tucson, Arizona. And one of the crops that they were able to send me, this is teosinte. I am holding in my hand, and I'll tell you, sometimes when I do this, I just get goosebumps thinking about it. I'm holding in my hand the mother of all corn. This is where corn started. Z. maize pavaglumas. It came from a cave in the Balsas Valley of the state of Guerrero in Mexico, and the indigenous tribes from Mexico all the way up to Canada and the Gaspé Peninsula have been selecting and doing their own breeding programs for about 10,000 years. And it's pretty impressive that I've got 10,000-year-old seeds in my hand. That I didn't realize that was going to happen. It's not about seed saving per se, but that's where seed saving can take you in schools. And I'll tell you, the kids, there's two things that will happen as a result of the seed saving. You can't avoid also the cooking pot. And if you find a kid that doesn't like to eat, you're probably remiss. So we do a lot of eating of some of the crops that we harvest to give them an idea of what it's like when the various people around the world from which we get our historical crops use the recipes and how they use them. So I'm just going to start now. There's no way in 40 minutes or 35 or whatever I've got that I can do justice to seed saving. So I first of all want to highlight some extraordinarily important places where you can go to get your answer to the questions that you might have on seed saving. This is our textbook in our class. It's called The Seed Garden. It's by Seed Savers Exchange. It's the art and practice of seed saving. And every question that you might have about seed saving is probably in here on a somewhat more technical level than you might need to go if you're a kindergarten, first, second, third, a grade teacher. But I do have another wonderful source. And Richard, if you could put up the one from called A Handful of Seeds. And if, okay, stop right there. Go back. Okay, now for you teachers, this is put together by an organization in California. I realize that you'll see in here, it says that these are based upon California educational standards. They are age specific. They start at the kindergarten grade and they go all the way up into adulthood in terms of the programs that you see here. But it's a seed study. And if you can go to the table of contents, and I think it's like on page whatever, coming up right there. Now, can you move it over? Because you're masking it, I'm masking it. I don't know if you can move it over. But these are the table of contents. And for those of you that would be interested, it's why save seeds in the school garden? What are seeds? Seed saving basics and how to start. And you want to start off, I will assure you, with the simplest crops that you can save seeds on. Save the complicated stuff until later if you want to get seeds to come back true to type. Because we always have the problem of seeds crossing unless we're careful about isolating. And I'll get into that in just a bit. But nevertheless, this book, which is 88 pages, it's free to educators to download. I have my copy right here. Beautiful colored copy. And there's a whole bunch, like I said, of educational lesson plans in here that are linked to the standards, again, for California, whose standards might be a little different from Maine. But anyway, that's that one. And so feel free to get on there. I believe that you, Richard, you gave them a link so that they can get on there and download it for themselves, right?
Yeah, so we will be sharing a whole document with all the links that we're discussing immediately after this presentation. And I did see somebody asked if we'll also have a recording of this presentation available as well.
Okay. So there's that one. So I would tell you, like I said, it's 88 pages. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I put them in a binder, and here's, it's got everything. Here's a grade level 4 through 6, talking about seed saving sayings. Here is seed packaging, how the kids can make up seed packaging. Grade 4, using your own, make your own it's, again, I can't do justice to it. There's no sense to even try. All I say is get on it, download it in color, print it in color, and you've got a wonderful source. There is another resource that I want to show you, and it's the one from Ellie Kaufman. If you could get from generation to generation. Okay, now stop right there, Richard. I am not sure. Ellie gave me this copy. Ellie gave me this copy, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked in here even to find out if it's free to download. But in here, it's again, I'm on page 5, Richard. I don't know if you can go to page 5, but it's grade by grade. There it is, right there. Activities that are grade by grade seed charts. And it talks on the next page about a family gardening, and then a wild garden. And then if you could flip it one more page, and here is native gardening and Three Sisters gardening ideas that Ellie has put together. All of these, I'm assuming that you can also download that because it is available. And there's that. So these are some sort resources. I've given Richard 2 more, I believe, 2 more resources. I'm not going to go over them now, but they give you a lot of specific information on how to start. And then it also answers where you get bottlenecked because you just don't have the answer that you need. And there are some other answers that you can find in the other links that I've sent. Okay, Richard, if you could file that away. Okay, so now let me talk a little bit about the specifics of seed saving. To save seeds to come back true to type. I know that you can save seeds, but saving seeds isn't just saving seeds. You want to save seeds if they have the story. You want the seeds of the story. She said, Mickey said, I have succotash seeds from the Narragansett that dates back hundreds of years. Well, if I want to save those seeds, I'd like to have them come back as true to the type that would have been used through the years that the Narragansett have been growing succotash. And that succotash was also used in the very first Thanksgiving that the Pilgrims and the natives shared at a point in time when there was at least some collaboration that took place. So, and we have them, and I would think that if you want to save those, you would want them to be quite pure. So the problem you have is you have to understand a little bit about the flowering mechanism. So I'm just going to give you, this is from kindergarten activity all the way up into college. and that's have the students research and draw or color and label and color a perfect flower. What is meant by a perfect flower is not that it's the most beautiful flower in America. A perfect flower is one that has all of the male parts and all of the female parts. And a classic example of that is apple. Apple blossoms have all male parts, all female parts. But you still have a problem. On certain crops, the male part of that flower cannot pollinate the female part to get viable seeds. And an apple is an example. You have to have cross-pollination because they're self-incompatible. And because they're self-incompatible, you've got to have at least two relatives of apple growing in close proximity and let the bees and the wind do the pollinating. So they're cross-pollinators. So that brings me to the next problem. If you have self-pollinators, there are very strong self-pollinators. And probably a good example of that is a regular leaf tomato. I would probably start with a tomato in my school garden because normally they will, under most circumstances, they do not cross. You might have to isolate them from a different tomato variety by 20 feet, but you can plant a whole bunch of one type of tomatoes together and let them do their crossing. But if you keep them isolated by 20 feet from another tomato, you're going to get Truda type seeds when you harvest them in the fall. So that's to get the ones that are strong selfers. If there is a problem of space in your garden, watch what we do. And we grow hundreds of different types of crops. So we have to make sure they're isolated. So what we do, and I think that maybe Richard, you gave a link for from the insect barrier. Do you have that insect barrier?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, anyway, I can go over it. I got this at Johnny's. It looks like a lace. And this is good for a couple of reasons. It may have nothing to do with saving seeds, but if you have a deer problem, or if you have a nice invader problem, this is a way to keep the deer away. And this is, like I said, the insects can't get through it. It's an insect barrier, and I got this from Johnny's. And what we do is we take a 1/2-inch electrical conduit we got from Johnny's, a hoop bender, and we bend the conduit like this, drive them in the ground, and then put this covering over it and anchor it down so that no insects can get in, no extra pollen can get in, hopefully no animals can get in, because certain animals can be a turkey. We have, our gardens are right out there, and we have a massive turkey invasion. And turkeys love to get in the garden and ruin it. And this will prevent turkeys, it will prevent deer, and also it's a way to prevent cross-pollination. So you can get as close as you can. I mean, I've done this, a row of this with a type of bean, and then another type of bean under this cover, and let it go. One thing I would caution you, however, if you're going to use floating cover, there are 3 levels of this. There's the lightweight, there's the medium weight, and there's the heavyweight. If you get the heavyweight remay of floating cover and use that to cover your crops, you're going to end up with a baked good, because it's going to get 120 on a day like today under this stuff. That will be frost protection, but that's all that's designed for, is to give you frost protection. Don't use that. Use the lightweight stuff, preferably use the insect barrier stuff that you can get. And that way, you know that whatever you keep in there, if it can pollinate itself, is going to be doing its own pollination. However, if it requires cross-pollination, you have another problem. And that is the problem of isolating by distance. And you've got to know your crop, how much distance you have to isolate to make sure they don't cross, to make sure that the seeds the kids harvest come back true to type. Let me give you an example. If you want to grow peppers in the garden and you want to save the seeds from peppers, and you want to save the seeds from this garden, which is right here, and then in the next garden, 50 feet away, and you want to grow sweet peppers, nice sweet peppers, so that they'll be available when the kids get back from school. There are your peppers. Over here, 30 feet away, you got hot peppers. Hot pepper is a dominant gene. And if you try to save the seeds from the sweet pepper because you think you like it, and then the next year you plant it out, you might want to taste it before you let the kids taste it. And you want to have the milk and crackers nearby, because the dominant gene is the hotness in the heat in peppers. So if you're given a sweet pepper and a hot pepper, the chances of you saving seeds, unless it was preserved under something like this to prevent crossing, is probably going to end up in a nuclear disaster. It's not going to be good. So that's that part of it. Now, one of the other parts that really is the part that got us going, I was, when John Thurston, who also is part of the organization you're a member of, and I started our heirloom seed program here at the high school in 1991. I went into John, I said, John, I just saw a victory garden that was amazing. The founder of Seed Savers Exchange held up seeds in his hand. And let me tell you, I got goosebumps watching it. I'm a goosebump person. They're called Mayflower. And these Mayflower seeds, he said, I have no idea if it's true. This is one of the things about some of the stories of some of the seeds that you might get online and get. But he said these seeds were supposedly brought over on the Mayflower. And being a science teacher who also has a certification as a history teacher, I said, John, we have got to go and get the historic seeds. So the result of that is that in that freezer, which is, and I'll get into this part in just a second, but that freezer is set at 10 below 0 Fahrenheit. And in there, anything in there, as long as we can maintain that temperature, anything in there is going to be minimally viable for probably 100 years. And there are certain crops in there, if we can maintain electricity and so forth, that would be in there that might be up to 1,000 years, and they're still going to be viable when you take them out. So I took these out. Now let me show you another one that I just took out. And when you save seeds, make sure your seeds are dry. This is supposed to be humorous. They're dry, they're dry, they're dry. The drier you get your seed, the more viable it lasts. For every 1% of relative humidity decrease, you can double the length of viability of a seed. A lot of people in their house have extra seeds left over. And the first thing they do is put them up in the cupboard in the kitchen, where you do your steaming and your cooking and that's a recipe for disaster. Keep the seed dry. To make sure they're dry, probably the best place to store the seeds are in a baby food jar, because I don't know what it's called, but there's a little plastic seal up in there, and you tighten that once you get your seeds in there. Make sure you label, and you put your seeds in a baby food jar. It is possible to use another type of jar, but make sure it's got that rubber seal involved, and make sure you put it very tight. I took these out at 2:30. And when you take them out of a freezer, you know they're going to get all frosty and condensed on the outside. If I open that up when it's frosty on the outside and has all this moisture on the outside, and I opened it up, all of the ambient moisture is going to go in there, and that's going to end up degrading the viability of seeds. So what you have to do when you take the seeds out of your freezer, which is where you want to keep them, in a sealed jar, not an envelope where you want to keep them, is when you bring them out, if this condensation is on the outside of the container, make sure you keep it in the room for at least an hour. And now it's probably at ambient air temperature. I can open this thing up, and the seeds that I have in my hand right now, quite historical seeds, are going to maintain their viability. To make sure of that, I don't know if you have any way, if you're a high school teacher, you probably can get this out of Flynn, maybe a middle school, your teacher, but this is a vial of little strips of cobalt chloride. And you want to get cobalt chloride, let me show you, it is humidity sensitive. Okay, I'm going to wet this. If I have any spit left, I tend to get a little dry in talking. So let me try it. Bing, see that? That indicates that that's moist and has moisture in there. So what we always do is take and get this as blue as we can with a hair dryer, and get it nice and blue, and then pop that right inside. And if you'll notice, that one inside that's in there, that's been there, that's a dry seed. If it's pink seed, and let me put this in some water, look what happens instantly. Moist, you're looking at death and destruction of seeds when you see that. Cobalt chloride. What you need to do is to dry it and make sure you keep checking and make sure it stays blue. If it stays blue, it's definitely dry, and you're going to get good, viable seeds for a long time, as long as I take them and put them in and refreeze them. Now, I know I've gone over a lot of stuff that's somewhat, well, hopefully I'm making sense with this. We have a question and answer, and I can answer any of yours, but let me just take a little second and talk about these seeds just for a second. Yes, for a second. These are called Altri coffee. I don't know, hopefully you can see it right up there. But that's Altri coffee. That's where you can get the history on the internet. It's from a village in the southern Tyrolean Alps, about 10 kilometers from where they found Utsi. Now, I hate this format of talking to a computer because I have no idea, you can't raise your hand, how many have heard of Utsi, the Iceman. But when they thawed out Utsi in Bolzano, Italy, which is only 10 miles from where these seeds came from, they found in Utsi's stomach some wheat that's called einkorn wheat. If I open up that refrigerator and go right down there, we have the same type of wheat that's at least 6,000 years old. It's the most ancient type of wheat. But this little village up in the southern Tyrolean Alps is called Altri coffee. And that's not the spelling of coffee. The coffee is coffee. But you find it on the web under that. And you'll find the whole story. The story goes for several hundreds of years. These people up in this isolated village, up on the side of this mountain, that's only on the travel road up through that valley that's been used for thousands of years to connect Europe, Northern Europe, to Asia. And that they're right on that valley. They probably got this via trade hundreds of years ago from the Mediterranean region of Italy. This bean, which is a lupin, check it out. This is the lupin. Here it is growing, and we grow in our garden. I've got about probably 300 of these growing because I want to get enough seeds of this to be a source of seeds for a seed company. So I'm going to get thousands of seeds, hopefully. But what they did with this seed and how they discovered it is about the same discovery as to whether, I wonder who the first person was who dared to eat a crab, a Maine crab from the lobstering industry. They're pretty ugly looking. Well, how did anyone ever know to roast these beans, put them in water, boiling water, and sip them and get Dunkin' Donuts out of it? I don't know. But if you take this and roast it, add it to roasted either barley, oats, rye, or wheat seeds, and get the formula, and I'll roast them all together and then boil them in water. They say, I've never tried it, but they say it's a dead ringer for coffee, and hence the name Ultra E Coffee. Now, the people in that village have been drinking that coffee for hundreds of years because obviously they don't have a Starbucks up in those mountains, and they probably don't even have a Dunkin' Donuts. So it's all of these seeds that we have all of the stories. I could tell you about every seed that MICU has because we catalog all of the stories of all of the seeds. I've talked with many of the people that have given them to us, and I've also sent many of the seeds back to some of the people who are requesting these seeds. Now, I don't know if I've touched on enough, but I've skipped around because my major emphasis on this is what you're going to find in there is going to give you the answer. It's going to be maybe a little bit more technical than you need for kindergarten and first grade. This one is going to be age specific and goes from kindergarten all the way up to high school. And this one also has some wonderful lessons in there that you could use. The resources that you use when you get into seed saving, there's a plethora of them because many, many people are getting into seed saving. Not only our reason was originally to save the biodiversity. If you're not saving the biological component of that plant that has been developed over hundreds of years, and you want to save that plant, you want to save that plant. And you want to save the seeds only of that plant. And you don't want it crossing with anything else. And so you've got to isolate, you've got to have barriers, you've got to know what you're doing. All of these are located in those various sites that I've given you that you can link to. I know that I have only covered the tip of the iceberg. I know that Richard said that there will be a place you can email. Richard, are you going to be giving them my email? Because I don't mind if they email me. I know that maybe other panel presenters could be overwhelmed with email. I get 70 a day. I might as well get another 70. Doesn't bother me. So if they have questions, you might give them my email if it's not available.
Yeah, we will certainly do that. And Neil, just so you know that there were some hands being raised when you talked about UTSI. So
okay,
that I saw. So
okay.
People did see that. And
wait, hang on. Wait, it's for them and only them. Just a minute. I just want to show this. Those are the seeds that were found in UTSI's stomach right there. Now, they didn't take them out for me, but those are the same kind. And notice what's happening with the frost. I can't open it now. Okay, now I want to go one more. I met and this is something which was fun. I met a most interesting Tuscarora gentleman when I was invited to participate on a panel at Penn State University in 1997. One of the things that's very important, and I'll try to touch on this, and this will be the last thing that I really want you to pay attention to. So can you see their eyes that they're drifting off? Wake them up, hit the bell, wake them up. Okay. This man, Norton Rickard, who is one of the members of the Wolf Clan of the Tuscarora Nation in North Tonawanda, New York, outside of Niagara, said basically this to me: you know, we're losing our cultural identity even on the reservation for our young people. Because, and this was a quote from him, once they get the pickup truck, all they want to do is to tool around, and they don't care so much about preserving the culture and the identity of the Tuscarora Nation. So we said, what I do, and there's a lot of stuff on the internet about him on YouTube, I grow this corn, which we have, and I said, Norton, could I buy this? Could I have this? He said, oh, that's expensive. I said, look, I don't care how much it costs. He said, $20. If he'd have said 120, I would have still bought it. But he shows the kids how to raise this corn traditionally. They raise the corn. They have a shucking bee in the fall. They shuck it. He shows them how to braid it. Now, I don't know if you can see this braided, but this is the one that he did. He shows them how to braid. And then once he braids it, up here on the loop where it hands up in his barn, he signs it so that he knows who braided this. And he looked at this and he said, that's my signature one. So that's the one that he did when he signed this. All a way to preserve not only the biodiversity of the seed, Tuscarora flower corn, which makes hominy through the process of nixtamalization. About 2 weeks ago, I got hominy from flower corn. I have done it with using wood ash, and I've done the whole process of nixtamalization myself. And then he had a buffalo stew. So I went over to Walmart, I got a pound of bison, made bison, used beans, put the corn that was in the form of hominy, and made the most amazing. The kids absolutely love it. I've never seen a kid that wouldn't have eaten that. I mean, a lot of it. It's very good stuff. But this is from the Tuscarora, and this is Tuscarora corn. What I also do with this, and I was hoping Miku would have gone over it, is we also, to make sure nothing is thrown away, we take, once we husk it, we soak the husks. Sometimes they're really pretty, the husks that you can get out of corn, even commercial corn that might have a little red streak when you do your Indian corn and put them up in the fall, up on your window or up on your door. Take the ones that are kind of red and soak them in hot water and let them get pliable. And this was a fun activity that we've done before. Haven't done it for a while, but is to make corn dolls and take the silks and make the hair out of the silks and to make corn dolls. Some of the dolls that you can see on the line are amazingly presented by the people who sell them commercially. If you look up corn dolls and corn husk dolls, you will find some amazing things done. Kids love to make good dolls using the methods that you can find on YouTube. And it's a real fun activity. And it also teaches the kids that you don't throw anything away. If you're given something, why do you put it in the trash barrel if you could do something with it? So we make dolls out of it, have made dolls out of it. I used to also teach a life skills lead class with life skill kids, and they used to love to make corn husk dolls. It was a fun activity. They look forward to it. Now, again, I know that I've skipped around, but there's no way that I could present a cohesive step-by-step seed saving program. Ask any question. I'll try to give you other resources. This book is a year-long textbook. So obviously in 35 minutes, I'm not going to cover it all. So ask questions, email whatever questions you want. We're at Madomic Valley High School in Waldoboro, Maine, for those of you people wherever. And we have seeds here that the only seed, we have about 1,000 different varieties in there, and they're all, the specification is they must be connected to some famous historical event, whether it's historical indigenous tribes, of which we have 42 represented, or the individual student's family. And one student, and I'll end with this one. One student about 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, at my age, time, hey, what's another 10 years? Asked me a little bit about this whole idea of the importance of saving the seeds in my family. He said, why is this important? I said, to you, I'll make up this name, Danny, is it more important to save George Washington's seeds from his garden or from seeds from your grandfather's garden? Because if you don't save seeds from Grampy's garden, they're going to be lost. George Washington's garden, probably someone's going to save those seeds. And he said, well, I want to save Grampy's seeds. I said, that's why you want to get into seed saving. Save the seeds that have historical history to you connection and that have biodiversity connections. And with that, I bid adieu. Hopefully I get some questions because I haven't covered enough to do justice to the topic, but hey, Richard said I had stopped right now, so I'm stopping.
All right. Well, I may go back on what I said and ask a question or two here. Anyway, but no, thanks for all that. And it's just such a wonderful resource that you have behind you and in your head. So appreciate all that. I am going to start getting into the resources we talked about, and I may ask you a question, Neil, along the way, if that's all right.
Yep.
All right. So Neil mentioned all the resources that we're going to be sharing with you and that he has compiled for everyone to see. First, I wanted to point out, so this is a document that everybody will get. I'll upload it onto a Google Doc form and then give everybody the link so that everybody can take a look at what we've got here. So more information on land acknowledgements and part of what we're discussing is the garden can be a great place to get into land acknowledgements with students in your garden. You know, you're talking with soil, you're talking about minerals in the soil that have been around for those thousands of years, and it is a link to history. So Portland Public Schools has put together this really great curricular guide for that. And so there's just, I really can't, you know, more strongly recommend take a look at that resource that Portland Public Schools is willing to share with everybody for Wabanaki studies. Moving on to the seed saving resources, we talked about the handful of seeds. When I shared it, I was able to go full screen when I practiced. I don't know why I didn't go full screen when the show was on, but anyway, you can also download that. I think for the slide share, you need to create an account, but I was able to make it full screen if you just wanted to do that. Generation to generation, the download was very easy for that. That was the other resource that Neil shared. And one other thing, Neil, that just wanted to ask you is, we mentioned some easy seed saving that can happen in a school garden. You said that beans don't require a great deal of distancing, plant social distancing or what have you. So beans can be a really good one if you're looking for something easy. And then we also talked about squash. And there's a link here to squash. But the thing is with the squash, you have to make sure you're doing your homework. And Neil, can you just talk briefly about that?
Yes, I can. Can they see my background information? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. The one problem with squash is that all pumpkins are squash, but not all squash are pumpkins. So as you think about that, I know there are more, but the big 5 species of squash are the peppos, which would be the pumpkins, zucchini, straight necks, the summer squash. They're considered peppo types. Then we have the next type, which is the machata. That's the butternut family. Then we have maximas. Those are the big guys, buttercups, hubbards, large winter squash. And then we have agosperma, which is the cushas. There is a 5th one. I won't even bother to mention it. No one does much with it, although we have it. Those, if you have a school garden and you want to do seed saving and you're isolated from other gardens that might grow squash, you can grow a pumpkin, a butternut, a buttercup, and a cushaw in the same garden, in the same space, and they don't cross. They don't cross in the species. But if you grew a buttercup and a hubbard, they cross, and you're going to end up with Nokomis High School hybrid number 58,000, because you don't know what you're going to get, but it will not be coming true to type. Again, a little bit like the hot pepper and the sweet pepper, they can cross. So this one can't cross with that one. So I could have, theoretically, in that garden across the street where we have our garden, I could grow 1, 2, 3, 4 of these every year in the same garden, and I'll be able to harvest the seed, and they'll be true to the type that I planted. If I do a pumpkin with a zucchini, I'm going to end up with a zoopy pump or a pumpy zook or something, but it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be. Right. And that's very important. And all of this in those resources that I've given you, and it's all right there. It's just that there's no way I could, and there's another way to show you how you could handle it if you do have that squash and that squash in the same garden. You can do something, but that's for another Zoom conference.
Awesome, thank you for that. So that resource also, if you want to kind of delve more into what Neil was talking about, squash, we've got that document from So True Seeds. And that can kind of break down those. So if you wanted to save one type of each squash in your school garden and you wanted to have it be true to seed, you could do that easily. The reason why I'm going to kind of change gears here, the reason why I think that really easy entry level seed saving can be a good thing is that school gardens present all sorts of challenges, and we're all coming at it at different levels. What Neil and John built at Madomic Valley High School is amazing, and what's been going on at other schools where there is a full-time garden coordinator, that's what we want everywhere. But as you get there, as you're volunteering your time, as you're staying late to learn about gardens on a Friday afternoon when you should be out in the sun, I'm sorry, then you're doing a lot. If we've developed a garden technique called the back to school garden, which focuses on really mulching your garden in June before you leave. So we have a technique here. You can click on the links that we send here called the Back to School Garden Guide. And see what happens there. So this guide kind of overviews on the Reach Us website, which is the organization that I work for. You can take a look at the practice. Really what it involves is a lot of mulching in June. And then we encourage folks to grow things over the, so step one, this, you know, people might have seen gardens like this. Unfortunately, this can happen to school gardens over the summer. So part of why I started this technique was you can take a garden that's kind of turned to the weeds and just dig it up a little bit. And then we encourage, in June, you can do this, you can lay down paper. So we did this when we're doing a school orchard, and you do 4 layers of recycled non-chlorinated paper, lay that out 2 or 3 levels deep, and then can put on some 2 inches of compost. Check out the next Maine School Garden Network newsletter. We'll kind of talk about how you can get Coast of Maine to donate compost to your school. You can get up to 10 bags. And you can use that in your back to school garden. And then the idea is that you can sow, oh, does that seed look familiar, Neil? There's some Dakota black corn there. You can grow that throughout the summer and it will dry out. You can do like a small block, tiny block in the middle of a garden bed. And you can have popping corn when you get back, so it dries over the summer. And the whole idea is that this is very minimal maintenance, that these layers of paper and compost decomposes over the summer, killing weeds and actually enriching the soil and bringing more biodiversity into your soil. So these kids are planting squash on the edges of the bed and corn in the middle. And the benefit of winter squash growing throughout the summer is that you can just set it and forget it with this mulch technique, come back in September, harvest your winter squash, harvest some popping corn, and then start fresh in September. We're trying to make seedlings available to schools that are interested, so that we're contracting places that have the capacity, maybe school gardens like Madamic, or but also farmers who are growing these seedlings for us, so that they're ready in September. And like the row cover Neil showed earlier, we'll provide some row cover so you can grow kale, lettuce, spinach, and chard and herbs into December, or even through December with the row cover. And this can all go right into your dining hall or cafeteria. And so that's the approach there. So we're working to build this program. It's the Back to School Garden program. I'm going to stop the share for a second and pull up more information here. So that's the Back to School Garden. I'm going to go through things really quick because I want to pass it to Ryan so he can talk about other ways to maintain gardens in the summertime, including gathering volunteers and coordinating volunteers so that you can grow more than just the Back to School Garden over the summer. So back to the other resources wanted to share. Again, for the sake of time, we don't have too much time to overview pollinator gardens, but I know it's something that I get asked a lot about, and there are some amazing resources. So these are some resources that you can use for your pollinator gardens, for creating your own, and that'll be on the document. I'm just going to kind of overview them. This National Pollinator Garden Network resource is fabulous. And Reach Us also has a pollinator lesson focused on bees that deals with fruit trees in particular. So if you want to study pollination, on the Reach Us website that you'll have a link to in this document that I'm talking about, you can explore how to talk about the anatomy of flowers and other curricula pertaining to pollination in the garden. But there's a lot there. There's ways you can create your own pollinator garden and tools and tips for what you want to attract, native plants you can grow. So that's a very quick breeze through pollinator gardens. Lastly, again, I mentioned I coordinate the program for Retree Us, doing orchards in schools. So far, we've planted 50 orchards around Maine. We've got just gearing up for another 11 this year. And so again, if you want to learn more about growing orchards at schools, or if you already have an orchard and you want to join our orchard caretaker list so you can get seasonal updates on ways to take care of your fruit trees, you can go to the Retree Us website and you can sign up for the orchard caretaker newsletter to take better care of your plants, of your fruit trees. And if you're interested in applying to receive an orchard from Retree Us, you can go to that website as well. So we've got orchards, we've got pollinator gardens, and we've got the back to school garden program that we discussed. Without further ado, I do want to pass the microphone to Ryan Parker from Food Corps to discuss other ways to maintain a garden in the summer through volunteers.
Thanks, Richard.
No problem.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate you sticking with us on this amazing Maine spring day. It's really wonderful to be outside. I'm fortunate to have Wi-Fi that hopefully reaches this far. I'm sure someone will let me know if I cut out, but I'll just start by sharing that, as Richard said, my name is Ryan Parker. I'm the Maine Associate Director of Programs for Food Corps. If you don't know what Food Corps is, we're a national nonprofit and we serve in 14 states. What we do is we create partnerships with communities and school districts directly to build and teach and connect kids to school gardens, cooking, and healthy food. We do this with the direct involvement of several, almost 200 Food Corps service members who dedicate a year of their lives to serving in schools. And several of this year's service members are here today, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to them for all they're doing for the communities and kids throughout Maine that they have a positive impact on. And also just want to share that I'm really excited this year because we've been working hard to get an increase in the number of service members that we get in Maine, and we have 2 more that we've been allotted this year. So I'm currently looking for schools that would like to partner with us and host a Food Corps service member for the coming school year. So if you're interested in school gardening and having some additional capacity and cooking and all the things that Neil and Miko and Richard have talked about, please reach out to me. I know Richard will share my email, but just quickly, it's ryan.parker@foodcorps.org. Food Corps has an S at the end. And like I said, Richard will share that, and please reach out to me. We'd be happy to have a discussion about whether or not partnership is great for next year for you and for us. Also, just one last thing before I jump into volunteers, keep an eye on the Maine School Garden Network newsletter. We'll be sharing registration for Maine School Garden Days. Yes, I said days, plural. We can't yet get back to our normal big in-person gathering that we like to do every spring. So we're going to have a months-long series of virtual gatherings. The first one is May 1st, 9 to 10:30 in the morning. So you can get outside and enjoy the rest of your weekend as soon as we're done sharing knowledge with each other. So I do want to just talk briefly about ways to engage folks other than yourself in the maintenance of your school garden. Richard talked briefly about mulching, and even if you're not going to do a back to school garden and you want to grow throughout the summer, I can't speak highly enough about mulching. I was a commercial farmer for over a decade, and I did what I guess would be the conventional way of farming, which was tilling a lot and a lot of cultivation and had a lot of employees. And then I discovered mulching years too late, and it's changed my entire farm. I still work a lot, but it's a different type of work, and that's what I want to talk about today. So can't speak highly enough about mulching, but whether you have a source for mulch or not, there are basically 4 ways to manage your school garden in the summer. The first one is essentially do it all yourself, which I'm sure many of you on this call do or feel like you do. We're going to talk a little bit briefly about the pluses and minuses of each of these. So the first one is do it all yourself. The second one is engage students with a summer program. The third one is to engage other staff at your school. And the fourth is to engage community volunteers. So again, I just want to look at all yourself. I know that there's a lot of dedication among school garden coordinators and teachers who volunteer their time, and garden coaches. And you're going to put a lot of time in no matter what, but there are different ways to organize your time and be as efficient as possible. So I really recommend against doing everything yourself in the garden, even if you feel like you have to. That's probably not the case. For one, well, there are two reasons to do that, not to do this. One is it's unsustainable in the long term. I mean, what happens if you retire? What happens if you have a family or a health emergency in the summer? So try to diversify the workload. That's just like anything else in nature. Diversity is key to success. And then even if you're lucky enough to be a paid garden coordinator, and a big part of your job is actually the maintenance of the school gardens for the students and other staff to return to in the fall, doing everything yourself over the summer, even if you love it, is really missing a huge opportunity to connect to the community, to the school in a positive way. I think a lot of us who have dealt with schools and been part of schools, and I'm on a school board in my community, we recognize that the relationship between the school and the town and the school and the community isn't always as healthy as we'd like it to be. And the school garden is a great way to change that because there's so many positives about it. So bringing people in is a fantastic way to change that conversation. So don't do everything yourself. Summer programming with students, there's a lot of good examples or several good examples of this around the state. I talked about wanting to share the pros and cons of each of these methods, and I really wasn't able to find a con for student programming. I can't think of a reason why you shouldn't do it. But that being said, it's probably the most complicated option for you in terms of having people physically in your garden, mostly because it will require the most amount of involvement and sign off from other members of the school staff community. So if you already have summer programming of some sort in your school or your district, you might have a slightly easier time to engage those students in the garden. If you don't have summer programming at all in your school, you might need to jump through some additional challenges and hurdles to get one going. But no matter which situation you find yourself in, I think it's important to think about the following. Who do I need to speak to create a summer garden program? And notice I use the word need. Who do you need to speak to? It's really worth spending time, what might seem like an inordinate amount of time, figuring out who needs to be involved in these decisions, because sometimes you ask the wrong person and everything gets scuttled. So who doesn't need to be involved? Who doesn't need to sign off on something? It's also worth, once you figure out who those people are that you need to talk to, it's worth figuring out the best way to approach them. What are their concerns likely to be? If you can foresee their concerns or their likely concerns, you can come up with potential solutions ahead of time. The third method, I know I'm going through this really quickly. Everybody wants to get back to their beautiful Friday afternoon, and Richard's going to share more information. But the third method of having volunteers in your garden is to engage other staff in the school. The big trouble with this is that the idea of engaging other staff in the school garden through the summer is it can be really hard to get that engagement. And that really isn't surprising considering how hard teachers and other school staff work throughout the rest of the school year. As a society, we ask more of our educational staff than can be done in a day, and we don't give them enough resources to do it all. So having a hard time getting that engagement from other staff can be disheartening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't value the garden and the work that you do for it. That's probably likely not the case, so don't take it personally. So in the case of engaging school staff, again, think about ahead of time, who do you engage? Who are your biggest champions? Who are the teachers that get the most out of the garden? You can also press on those buttons. What do they get out of the garden? You know, behavior issues decrease. We can make connections to the curriculum, achievement increases. I mean, everybody who's on this call probably recognizes that, but not everybody else can see it. So we might have to tell them. Figure out who your major allies are. Who are the teachers that are already most excited about taking their kids out? Those are the people who might want to have some more engagement. Also, how flexible can you be as the person who's responsible for the garden? I know myself, I'm kind of a control freak. I don't like to relinquish any control in the garden. But if you can be a little bit more flexible, if a teacher comes to you or another staff member comes to you with excitement about a project and they need a space in the garden, being able to have that flexibility and letting them have that space is going to give them more ownership over that space, and they're going to take better care of it. And that's one, area of square footage that you don't have to maintain over the summer. And they're likely to take better care of the surrounding area as well, so that it's good for their uses and their kids. Um, so I said earlier that even if you're not maintaining the garden physically yourself, you're still going to be doing work. It's just a different kind of work. And what I'm about to share is true of both staff and of volunteers from the community. And that's making sure that they have what they need to accomplish their and your goals. What tools do they need and when? What do you need them to do and how will you train them? What accountability and communication will you cultivate to ensure that they're doing the best they can in the garden? So transitioning to community volunteers, it's likely this is going to be the easiest for someone like me who has a hard time letting other people make decisions in my garden. This is going to be the easiest because usually these types of volunteers are going to be your most engaged parents, and they're just going to show up and ask, what can I do? I love that kind of volunteer. So you're going to have the manager going to have things for them to do. They're again, your most engaged parents. Keep in mind that no matter how engaged they might be, no matter how excited they might be, this is true of staff and kids as well. It's really important at all times to be grateful and to share your thanks as often and authentically as possible, so that people don't feel like you're taking their contribution for granted. So thank you, send a note, give them some tomatoes from the garden every once in a while, just something like that. The people who are most engaged are likely to be the most supportive of your program when you need their support most, which is usually school budget season. So how do you reach these people? Most of us have school newsletters. See about talking to your administrator about getting space in there. If you don't have one, you can start a school garden Facebook page. There's some great examples of those around the state. Troy Howard Middle School has a great one. That's in Belfast. And that's a great way. Most parents these days are on Facebook, so it's a great way to engage them. Also, who are your rock star students? Who are the people that you can say, go home and talk to your parents, see if you guys want to come in as a family? And then the last thing I'll just say is you have to think about how you're going to train these people. Pre-COVID, there were a couple of different methods. One, you could have a big training day in the spring and have all the families that want to volunteer, all the parents come together and just do it once. Now you have to be a little bit more thoughtful in planning that. You might have to space it out over weeks. To think about what you want volunteers to do, whether it's watering, weeding, harvesting, or mulching. And whatever that is, be sure you write it down and plan it out, and then give them the tools that they need to accomplish that. And then lastly, I'll just say, I said there were 4 methods. Do it all yourself, summer programming with students, engage with other staff, and then engage community volunteers. But really, the best programs are the ones that use all 4 of those. So you're going to do a lot yourself no matter what. If you have the opportunity to bring students into the summer program, great. Engaging staff gets more buy-in because those students are going to want to go out to the garden during the school year. And then again, the more you can engage the parents and the community volunteers, the more support you're going to have when it comes to school budget season and when you want to do something with your garden. So I really appreciate Maine School Garden Network and Richard organizing this, and hope everybody has a great weekend.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, again, on your point about giving gratitude, thank you very much, Ryan, Neil, Miku, for your time. And thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to tune in on what we can tell is a beautiful day, looking at Ryan's background. Again, we'll be sharing in an email these additional resources, as well as answering some of the questions we received during the Q&A, and some shout outs various people are getting. And so thank you. If you had a question or made a comment, we will again follow up afterward. So I hope that this was helpful for where everybody is coming in. And again, keep growing those gardens and keep inspiring the youth. And what you do is so important. We're happy if any of these resources can help you do what you're doing. So again, it's 4:30. Enjoy a lovely weekend and keep up the good work. So thank you all.